For Cayuse Chamber of Commerce, I'm Wayne Lawrence. Is owning your own business a blessing or curse? We're going to find out today. I've got Cal Hunter, owner of ShortStack Printing. Cal, thanks for joining us today on the podcast.
Great to be here.
So we're going to learn a lot from you. the listeners and viewers are going to learn a lot from you. You've been in business for quite some time, and I'm excited about hearing your story and just kind of what you do and how you went about it, because I know you've had some goods and bads and ugly like I've had, and we've had a chance to talk in the past. So first of all, tell me, what is ShortStack Printing? What do you guys do?
Well, ShortStack Printing is a short-run, quick turnaround print shop, and we're an online vendor. So we ship all across the country, and basically any order that's in by 10:30, we ship out the same day.
Wow!
And or if it's somebody local in Cleveland, they can pick it up the same day.
Okay. And how long have you been in business?
We have been in the printing business since 2003.
Okay. Wow. So 20 years that you've been in printing business.
Yeah.
Did you purchase the business or start? I can't recall. I know we talked in the past.
Yeah, it kind of, I was in the real estate business before I got in the printing business. And I had a concept that kind of included real estate and printing. And that real estate didn't do very well, unfortunately. Okay. And the printing did. So
okay.
I kind of got in the printing business that way. So I started up, and then I made an acquisition of a business in 2005 called the Inkwell.
Gotcha. Okay. So you started your company, and then you were able to acquire another company in 2005 that helped you grow. How many employees do you have?
So currently 4.
4. Okay, good. And how do you find them, out of curiosity?
I just recently had to find somebody. I haven't had to in a while. And I'm using a temp agency. Temp to perm.
Okay, good.
It's worked out pretty well.
All right. So let's get started in this. I'm going to ask the question, all right?
Yeah.
So you've been in business for quite some time, 20 years. You actually even went through an acquisition, which we're going to delve into a little bit later. You got 4 employees. So tell me, after all this time, is owning your own business a blessing or a curse?
It's definitely a blessing. I mean, you can't be anything else, especially if you do it for 20 years. But that being said, it's being an owner is a lot more complicated than being an employee. So and it has its own problems and issues. Constantly looking to solve.
So and it is complicated. I agree. I mean, I've been in business for quite some time, and it just seems like every day is sort of new. And we face things that we never thought we'd face before. For example, one of the challenges, you've been in business for quite some time. So you went through that whole period of the 2008 crisis. You went through the pandemic. You went through all those things. Tell me about that, and how did you persevere? How did you get through it all?
It's funny you bring that up, because I've actually gone back and looked at my financials during that time, and I just scratched my head, and I just wonder, how in the world did I make it? Because it doesn't make any sense to me. The printing industry was deeply affected by the 2008 financial crisis. It was a significant shift. The internet was around by then, and people were doing Google ads and all that kind of stuff. So that wasn't new, but that financial crisis, that's when companies decided, you know what, maybe I don't need letterhead anymore. Maybe I'm not going to print my ads. I'm just going to buy Google. And so the printing industry went through a drastic decline, and it really. We were lucky right at that point. We got one customer that was just sending us all kinds of business, and so we kind of weathered it through. But then by 2010, we lost that customer, and we were back to basically 2008, and we totally had to rethink it. And that's when we came up with the ShortStack Printing concept, and we basically fired 80% of our customers.
Wow. Okay.
So, and that was pretty scary.
Oh, absolutely, and that's a fascinating story. First of all, and so you're going through this, and you're trying to make this, and I'll use the word pivot. That seems to be a popular word, especially
Yes.
through the pandemic. So you had to make these adjustments at the time. How did you do that? Was this something that you decided to do on your own? Do you have resources available to you in terms of people you talk to? Because many times as business owners, you feel like we're isolated and making decisions on our own. How were you able to make it through that period of time and make those decisions?
Well, first of all, my dad is my biggest advisor and so forth. But it's interesting because we don't see eye to eye on many things. So it makes it kind of tough to decide which advice to take and which not to. For instance, he thought the ShortStack printing idea was not a smart move for us, and yet it ended up being. It was a very risky move, and I think that's why he didn't like it. Mm-hmm. But the reality was it was the right decision. Inkwell was a franchise. And so while we were part of that franchise, we never made a single profit, not one. And partly because the franchise system really was in decline. And so it wasn't set up to, it wasn't like a McDonald's that you pretty much just made money by being in business.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the problems. But from the point that we switched over and got out of the franchise, went to ShortStack printing, we've been profitable ever since.
You mentioned your the sort of disagreement with your dad, and I think that's really healthy for any business because we can't surround ourselves with people who just think we're awesome, and we're golden people, and everything's going well. I mean, by having people just kind of challenge your thought process and where you want to go and the direction you're going in, I think it's healthy for any company, any entrepreneur, because at the end of the day, you have to justify it to yourself and them as well. So unfortunately, you came out on top. It was a good decision. And not everyone makes a good decision. I've made bad decisions over time with my business, but to be able to justify it to others and almost convincing myself that this is the right route to take makes a lot of sense. So
definitely. And just to add on to that, I think one of the big things that I've realized, and it took me a long time to really understand this, but I always thought in terms of a right and wrong decision. Okay, and like for instance, my decision was right, my dad's was wrong on the ShortStack thing. But the reality is that there's right and wrong decisions for each person. And you have to take that into context, especially when you're taking advice from people.
Yeah.
Because somebody might have great advice, but it might not be the right advice for you. And that's one thing you have to learn to sort out because, the decision my dad had was right for him. That's the way he processed things, and he probably would have made that decision successful. I wouldn't have. And so that's very tough to sort out when you're getting advice, and why it's probably important to get advice from multiple people because different people will give you different takes based on their situation. Oh,
I agree, and that's good advice as well too. You and I are old school. I mean, we're old, but we're old school as well. But I say that meaning, I mean, you and I first met through a Chamber of Commerce, so we've known each other for quite some time through the Chamber.
Yes.
In full disclosure, we've done business together. I've had a opportunity to move you guys, and then you did some signage for my trucks and stuff. So we've done business together as well too. And I'm an advocate for chambers. I think that those who take advantage of it can really network and be able to grow their business. So, but things have changed a little bit, especially with pandemic in terms of the opportunity to network. How do you go after customers now? How do you acquire your customers with this now, data age and, with social media and everything else?
Well, for the most part, it's an organic online because like I said, our main business is online driven.
Okay.
In fact, there's a certain disadvantage for me to network and come across somebody and say, hey, I want to do some printing. Let me look you up. Because, and this goes back to why we fired 80% of our customers, because we knew they were not going to switch to the online model. And let me just take a little side note on that, because the online model for a printer is significant because basically it takes out 80% of the business process of a typical printer. That is speccing paper, deciding, designing the image, getting a proof, and then after the printing's done, collecting the money and all that kind of stuff. I spent more of my time in those business processes and less time printing, and I make money printing. So switching to the online model, people were already sending me artwork that was complete. They'd paid me up front. They were picking from papers that I had already had, and that was it. It just simplified the process significantly.
When you really even think about that part of it, those who are listening or watching the podcast, and especially if you're new at business, that's a scary thought. Like, how could someone fire their customers? But you and I both know that there's good business and there's bad business. There's profitable business and there's not so profitable. So, what I'm gathering is that you kind of really looked internally at your customer base and saw, determine which ones were more profitable because there was ease of execution and handling them and efficiencies in handling them.
Correct. And that's exactly the profit wasn't necessarily that the printing job wasn't, it was a profitable print job, everything we did, but we weren't making money. And the problem is every customer was taking up the time in those other processes. And the reason we had to fire 80% is we knew that they were not going to be the type of person that just went online and ordered what they wanted. And so we didn't have, when we made the switch, we reduced staff. When I was at the Inkwell, I think we had 8 employees.
Okay.
So we cut staff. We didn't have the resources to answer the phone, which is how we typically were getting orders in. And so that's why we looked at customers, and we ended up with 8 customers that we kept that said, these are worth keeping. We can support these.
Okay.
And then we were going to grow ShortStack. And 1 week after I make that decision, the biggest customer of those 8 comes in and we had switched the way we were printing some stuff for him, unbeknownst to him. We'd been shipping it and thinking, oh, this is great. And he comes in, he says the color's not the same. And it was because we'd gone to, I don't want to get technical, but different process. So it looks slightly different.
And he noticed it. Yeah.
He didn't notice it for a year.
Okay.
And we assumed he had already noticed it.
Right.
And so he came in and he said, well, I can't have this. And we didn't have any way to print it the way he wanted, because one of the things we did was got rid of our old 2-color presses.
Okay.
So again, I'm getting into technical stuff here.
Were you able to keep the customer though? And
No. That was the thing. So
that was it, huh?
1 week after making this big change, that was another big blow that we lost a fairly large customer out of the. But again, it was the best thing I could have ever done.
Okay. So you said you have 4 employees. Have they been with you a long time? How do you train them? And what are some of the challenges of even having employees? There's a lot of businesses who they're the single employee. So what do you think about having employees? And has it been tough to find them, train them? And what are the challenges with that?
Yeah, so there's a challenge for us all the way around, because, we like a larger commercial print shop, you basically have a guy that handles cutting. That's all he does all day. And somebody else that handles a press. So it's a single source thing. Basically I have people that do multiple finishing items and that kind of stuff. So it makes it very difficult to find that person. So part of that has been that we've automated a lot of our finishing so that it doesn't take a lot of technical knowledge to do it.
Okay.
And so we're more inclined to go with more of somebody that has like an office management type background as opposed to an industrial printer. But that being said, we've we keep hitting I'm finally feel like I'm getting in growth mode again, and but I was feeling like that 3 years ago, and COVID hit, and boom. So I keep finding I have these excuses to not push the growth envelope, so now I'm back in it and trying to get there, and I'm trying to update my processes, which.
Do you have any partners or financial investors in the business, or is it you?
Well, my father is. This is a family business.
Okay.
I got to make that clear that as far as ownership and so
Okay.
forth. Yeah.
So that's an interesting dynamic in itself, a family business. So is this something that goes home at night or goes to the holiday party? You're talking about the latest run or the fact you couldn't match up the right colors, et cetera, or do you just let it go and kind of separate that as much as possible?
We separate it. It just,
for you.
Yeah. I mean, one of the nice things about the quick turnaround process, most printers work in like a week time frame or so. So they constantly have a book that's full and so forth. The nice thing with the short run is we're done. We know exactly when the finish time. There isn't really, and that's kind of nice to have a finality in the process. So once we're there, and you go home, it's just not. You don't want to talk about it anymore.
So are you at the point where you've thought about what's next, a succession plan, or you have a 1, 3, 5 year plan ahead of you?
I've never been very good at whenever I've done something like that, it gets a little dusty.
Okay, sure.
And so then you get to the point, well, why even waste time doing that?
Right. Okay.
But yet, that's probably why I keep finding excuses not to push the growth envelopes too. So,
okay.
But I am at the point now. I keep saying excuses. So, for instance, I was putting kids through college and so forth, and so I just didn't want to. I've had enough bad experience on the negative side. I didn't want to disrupt things to, invest money so that it took away from my profits while I was trying to pay off other things. And so now I feel like my kids are out of college, but that's when the pandemic hit. And so now the pandemic's over, and so I'm ready to kind of move forward.
So, Cal, you're in an industry where it always seems to be new technology and automation. How are you adjusting to that? Are you making any investments in anything?
Well, it's interesting because with the ShortStackPrinting.com, with the website and online portal, not that I was anywhere near the first online printer or whatever, but I definitely was ahead of the curve there. And but what I'm realizing is that I've kind of let that be my feather in my cap for too long and just think I'm ahead of the curve. And I kind of woke up this year and realized I'm quite a bit behind right now. And so I've spent a lot of time kind of re-looking at things. I'm looking at updating the website for one, but more importantly, like for instance, I use QuickBooks for my accounting, and that's such a pain in the neck. I used the desktop model forever, and I really didn't want any changes because I didn't want to have to learn a new software or anything like that. And so this year, QuickBooks basically forced you to go with their online thing, and I did that, and it was like night and day. I mean, I can't believe how much easier my accounting is, and it makes all different parts of my business so much more efficient and so forth. And so instead of constantly being behind on my accounting, I'm actually up to date and everything like that. And it just was such an eye opener that's really what got me to realize I need to take a look at everything I'm doing, because this is making me so much more efficient. And it's like the example I've used before is, I went to college in the 80s. And so like the leading edge was to teach you Excel and use that in your workplace and so forth. So I learned Excel, but then my kids went to college and they do the same thing, but they're learning like a whole different, like, what are you using? I couldn't believe some of the tools that they use in Excel that I didn't even know existed, because I just was used to the old stuff that I learned in the 1980s. And so again, I've really been pushing to try and figure out ways to make my business more efficient, so I'm spending less time on things and so forth.
And I think that's it, Cal. I think it's becoming more efficient, but it's all about time as well, too, and stress. So as we continue in our businesses over time, and we've been in business for quite some time, you're looking for ways to become more efficient, but also to free up your time for other projects and to, maybe even have that work-life balance as well, too. So, and technology gets you there. We can't teach, new tricks to old dogs, I guess.
Yeah.
If we had to. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I feel like, especially with the AI kicking in out, we are at a point where if you don't jump into this, you're gonna be falling behind significantly. And part of the issue for me is always you don't have time to invest in learning or updating your processes, but I'm realizing I've got to find that time and make those changes, because otherwise, people are going to keep moving ahead of me. So
Absolutely, and no one wants to get left behind.
yeah, definitely.
What keeps you up at night then? What's really the curse? I mean, you've over 20 years. I mean, it sounds like you persevered and went through a lot of roadblocks, and you're here, and you're still here. Now you're even considering, how do you get into that growth model again, which is tough for any business, especially a mature business. But what keeps you up at night? What's going to keep you up tonight?
Yeah, well, you mentioned what keeps me up. Because I've been telling people, even though I've been through the pandemic and the financial crisis, a year ago, the paper industry went through a very significant shortage, and a lot of printers went out of business because of it, because they couldn't get papers from suppliers.
So you had source of supply issues big time during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And just the cost going up, obviously, because of the source of supply. It just wasn't out there, was it?
No. And, and it's funny because for the longest time, if I increase my price by a penny, I get a call from how come your prices are going up? And with the pandemic and using the supply chain issues and all that, I mean, first of all, we had to, because our prices were going up significantly. But I couldn't believe how compliant everybody was when, I passed along a 25% price increase, because everybody kind of knew at that time. It was such a strange experience to not have to actually worry about raising prices, because everybody was kind of on board with it.
I agree. I think every business struggles with, should they raise their price and what would it do to their overall business? I think the pandemic caused many companies and consumers to rethink that. I've got 90% of my business, all consumer business, and, which is an interesting dynamic for me, because, you're really comparing prices across other moving companies and checking them out. But we struggle with, should we take our rates up? But meanwhile, we were paying our employees and our movers more money. Our insurance went up, our trucks went up, our materials went up, cardboard went up, everything went up. And so we finally had to go up a little bit. And actually, our customers responded not favorably, but we didn't get a lot of pushback on that. They just felt it was fair. They felt it was a value for what they're getting. So I would assume that some of your commercial customers just knew it too, because they had to take their prices up, I would assume, right?
Yeah, exactly. But it still is just, the other thing is I'm a price seller. I've always been, which they say that's not a very, very good type of business to be in, because if you win the business on price, you're going to lose it on price. But I've shifted that mentality a little bit, but it's always there. So again, the idea of raising prices to me was like very, very tough to even think about. But like I said, I couldn't believe how easy it was. So
you had the opportunity to kind of work with your dad, and you still do. So if you were sitting across the table from some young entrepreneur with a lot of hopes and dreams, and certainly want to get out there and start their own company, what advice would you give them today? What have you learned from your experiences over 20 years?
One of the biggest things I would suggest to people is, if you're starting off with an idea or something, keep your old job, do it on the side, make it a side hustle or job until you can prove the model to some extent. But then once you have some sign of it, then you got to make the jump and then kind of put all your resources. You can't. I don't think you can do both. But on the other hand, I just think in this day and age, and even it's just a better strategy to at least have something going. I've always come up with a lot of ideas that did completely nothing. And so one of the things I tell people is that although I failed at so many ideas, when I started this ShortStack, I think in the first month we had 3 orders, online. And most people would say, well, this sucks. Well, for me, since I had other ideas, I'd never had a sale on.
Right.
I'm like, well, this is actually going pretty well. So I don't think people realize that nobody has, that old commercial where the people are looking online on their sales and all of a sudden the dial just starts churning. That just doesn't, other than Google, that just doesn't happen. It takes a lot of time to get there. And that's why I think it's important that you, if you can, keep your foot in the real world, start up, and then as you start to see it working, then move on.
Yeah. And I think that's great advice, because there are a lot of people out there who who do have companies and side hustles, as you would say, and they're just wondering, when do you take the leap of faith? And I don't think there's an exact time or science or, maybe a financial position you are, but eventually, if you want to grow that company, you're going to have to go all in. You really are. You're going to have to go all in, because it becomes a 24/7 to get it started and going. So I think that's great advice, to just, keep some sort of sense of stability, but at the same time, continue that risk and look for that reward. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Cal, I really appreciate you coming on. I think that those who listen to it are going to find it fascinating. I would love to hear from someone 20 years from now who's been in business and talk to them as well. But thanks for sharing your story. I really enjoyed it. And I wish you the best of luck, man.
Hey, really appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks, Wayne.
Okay.
This podcast was made possible with the support of our sponsors. Find more ways to grow at chieast.org.